This week, we are going to be spending today and tomorrow on Module 1. It's pretty quick with our first exam this Friday. But don't forget, this first exam does have 3 attempts, so I don't need to stress out about it too much. And if you don't do good the first time, you can always ask me about it and we can fix any mistakes then before you use your second and third attempt. So what we're going to be doing today, I'm going to start by doing a lecture over some basic ideas of Excel, and then I'm going to show you where to download the workbook. We're just going to spend the rest of the time working through those questions in that workbook, and then potentially doing the same thing with the homework if you get that far. So if you've checked your email recently, I sent out an email maybe 10 minutes ago or something with some notes I'm going to go over. You don't need to download those. It's just if you want to check them out later. I'm going to share my screen with them in a second. But basically, whenever I have some notes that I'd like to go over, I'll email those out in case you'd want to go over those on your own later on. And I also sent out a link in that same email mentioning that I'm going to be recording these lectures and posting them on YouTube, just in case you want to go back and rewatch anything. Maybe I went over too fast or whatever. So let's see. Let's start by opening up Excel, or at least I will. And you guys can just watch. So this is what Excel looks like. It's just a bunch of squares that are arranged in a grid that allows us to organize our thoughts. And we can put all sorts of math in here that we're going to learn eventually. But all we're really doing today is focusing on one concept, which has to do with dragging and utilizing addresses. But oops, wrong side. Before we do that, let's start even more basics. How do we even do math in Excel? Well, let's say I want to do some arithmetic in here, and I just go to this cell and I type that arithmetic. Nothing really happens. So the first thing I want to teach you is whenever you actually want Excel to compute something, you need to start with an equal sign that tells Excel it's going to be doing some sort of formula. And arithmetic works just as well. We can type that into our formula there, spits out our answer. There we go. So don't forget about that symbol when you're actually trying to do some math in Excel. Next thing is I want to point out there are tabs along the bottom. There's tabs in this file as well as the one we're going to use in this module later on. I'm going to click on these to go to the next slide there. So next thing I want to talk about is how every single cell in this spreadsheet has its own address. For example, this cell here with the $100 in it is in cell E6 since it's in column E and row 6. You can also see the address once I click on it up here in the top left. It says I'm in E6 right there. And this is really useful because let's say I have some sort of problem where I'm computing the revenue. Revenue is price times, times units sold. Okay, that's great and all. But we could also use these addresses instead. So instead of always typing directly in the numbers that you're utilizing, instead I could have used E6 and E7. Let's see how that works. So after I type equals, I'm just going to click on E6 and it types the formula for me, times E7. Now, it gives us the same answer. So why might we do that? Well, there's actually 2 reasons. And here's the first reason. Let's say that we're on an exam and this problem is actually complicated and didn't just take us 2 seconds to fill out. Let's say we spent all week working on this. Maybe this took us an hour to work on. Well, if you use cell references, you don't have to rebuild everything from scratch. You just change the number that are involved to whatever the exam asks. Maybe the exam is $200. Actually, let's use a different quote. $80, and then it recalculates itself. The reason I didn't want to use 200, I'm pretty sure this is going to break. Awesome, did. But that's okay. So this is a very common error in Excel. that does not actually mean you did anything wrong. It just means there's not enough space to display what you wanted. So if you go up here to the column and you hover over the right-hand side, you can actually stretch it. And now there's enough room to display what we wanted. So a couple different useful things there, but the main thing I wanted to point out is addresses are really nice because if you update those addresses, your formulas update with the now correct answer. Now that's useful, but here's an even more useful thing that involves utilizing addresses. Let's say I want to fill out this table, very simple table. It's just the number in the A column plus the number in the B column. Okay, that works fine, but I want to do it all the way down. Let's do that one, whoops, plus that one, plus that one. Okay, I've done 3 of these and I'm already annoyed. And in the future, there might be thousands of these. And I don't want you to hard code in thousands of these. That would take all day and it's pointless. So here's a little trick. Let's say we finish the first one and we use cell references with these addresses like so. Well, after you're done, you hit enter and you go back and select this cell. If you hover over the bottom right corner, notice how the mouse changes. So when it's this white one, that's when I can click on stuff. But if I go to the bottom right corner, it changes this little black one. If I click, hold down, and drag, I get all that stuff for free, which is really nice. And it only works because we use addresses. Let's see why. So this first one used those 2 cells, right? But as I drag down, notice the addresses I was referencing moved down with me. And that was the only reason Excel knew what to do. Since I started here and I drug down every reference, these 2 guys, the blue and the red guy, they moved down with me because that's sort of the default behavior. And that's exactly what I wanted it to do. So great, saved me a lot of time. Now, let's look at a different example. Let's see what happens when it's not as nice. Let's say I have this example here, and I've already typed in the formula. I have that number next to A, which is 3, times one of the numbers underneath B, which is 6. Okay, great. 3 times 6 is 18. But there's an issue here. And the issue is what happens if I drag this guy down? Well, let's think about what happened last time. If I drag this down, this reference will also move down. That's great. That's exactly what I wanted to do. But this one will move down as well. Okay, that's not even a cell. That's not a number. And then it's going to start moving into other nonsense. So that's a problem, right? And I can actually see this if I drag it down and see what happens. Like this guy is trying to use this blank cell. This guy doesn't even know what's going on because it's trying to multiply words times numbers. And so that didn't work. So what I actually wanted to do is I wanted this red guy to move down, but I wanted this blue guy to stay put. And so we need to add one more symbol to our formula in order for that to happen. So notice with these addresses, each address has 2 components. It has a letter and it has a number. And as you go down, the number changes, right? Because we have these numbers going up and down representing the row. But as I go, whoops, don't want you. As I go left and right, it's the letter that's changing because the letters up here represent columns. Okay, so when I'm telling Excel, when I'm describing, hey, what should stay put? Let's think about that really quick. What is the component of, I have 4 choices here. I have a D, a 6, a C, and a 9. What's the thing I need to stay put? Well, let's just look at these addresses really quick. As I move down, D6 times C9 is correct. Then it went to D7 times C10. C10 is this blue, or sorry, let's have that backwards. D7 is this blue guy. That's in the wrong spot. This red guy, that's fine. So the thing that was wrong is it moved from D6 to D7. I did not want that to happen. I wanted it to stay in D6, specifically the 6, right? It was always going to stay in D anyway, because when you move up and down, notice all these cells are in D as I go up and down, right? That wasn't the issue. The issue is that it needed to stay in row 6. So how do I fix that? Well, when we're looking at our formula, it's not the D I want to lock, it's the 6. So I go immediately in front of the 6 and I put a $sign. And that tells Excel, hey, as you're updating these addresses, never change this thing in after the $sign. And now it works, right? Look, it's always D6, D6 times C11, then 12. That's exactly what I want. Now we can have the exact same example going left and right. Now I have D5 over here in blue and G5, and I want to go right down this table. So I want this red guy to move. So it's going to go from G5 to H5, then I5, and so on. But this blue guy, I want to stay put. I do not want this motion to happen. I do not want it to move from D5 to E5. And because I'm going to drag this left and right, this is the motion I'm worried about. It's not going to do this. I'm not going to drag this example up and down, so I don't have to worry about that. So I have to tell it, hey, stay in this column D. So now I go in front of the D, not the 5, and put the $sign there, right? That is different than that. So I put it in front of the D, I drag it right, and it all works out. D5 times G5, still D5 times H5, still D5 times I5, so on and so forth. So that's how locking works. You either put it in front of the letter, or you put it in front of the number, or there's actually examples where you put it in front of both. Let's, I want to show you one more thing. This doesn't happen as often, but sometimes you can actually drag up and left as well. It's very weird to fill out a table this way, but I just wanted to show you it's possible, just because the workbook's going to mention it. Typically, I'm always dragging down or right, but just that's how we read. But the workbook will mention left and up. It is possible. Okay, let's do a two-dimensional example. In this table here, I'm dragging up, down, and left and right. Like, right? I have the multiplication table set up where I'm taking one of these numbers in A and I'm multiplying it by one of these numbers in B. So like for this cell here, I'm going to multiply 8 times 4, right? But I don't want to have to do this one at a time. I want to just take this and drag it all the way down. Here's a little trick you can use. So there's two parts to this address, right? We got the blue guy and the red guy. The trick is that the blue piece of this formula always comes from here, right? One of these 5 numbers. Look at these addresses. What do they all have in common? Are they all in D or are they all in 9? Well, obviously the first one. These are all in D, right? So for this blue guy, I know that I'm never going to leave column D, so I lock it. Same thing here. What do these 5 numbers all have in common? They're all in row 8. So this red guy, I make sure it never leaves row 8. Now, you have to do this in 2 pieces. I drag it right, I let go, and then I drag it down. There's my whole multiplication table, which is really nice. I only had to do one formula. Saves a lot of time. And now we have $2 signs. That made everything appropriate. Because remember, this blue guy, I never wanted it to leave column D. Red guy, never wanted it to leave row 8. What else? There is one additional thing that the workbook's going to test you on. It's a little bit tricky, and it has to do with the fact that when you're creating these formulas, there's more than one solution. Let's think about this. Let's go back to this example where we figured out, hey, I should lock this 6. Is my screen frozen for everyone else? I just got a chat message.
It's not frozen for me.
Thank you.
It's fine.
All right. Maybe your internet connection got slow or something. I'm not entirely sure why it froze. But anyway, let's go back to this example. We locked the 6. Whoops. And it worked just fine. What about if I also locked the D. Would that have worked if this blue guy, if I tell it, hey, always stay in column D? Yeah, it looks like that works too. So why is there multiple solutions in this case? Well, let's think about this. When I'm dragging up and down, this is the only thing that can happen. My references can also move up and down. If all I'm doing is going up and down, the references can only move up and down, which means this blue guy will never move to E, right? Like I'm not going left and right. Therefore, even though this blue guy is always in column D, I didn't have to lock the D, because when you're only going up and down, the columns aren't going to change anyway. So it's sort of unnecessary locking. It's optional, if you will. And that leads to multiple solutions like this, where you have this extra dollar sign that works. Likewise, I could have locked the C on the red guy, right? Because all of these are in column C. Still works. And that's because, again, I'm only going up and down. It was always going to be in column C anyway. So it was optional. I didn't have to. And so the workbook's going to try to trick you with these. It's going to give you some multiple choice question where maybe it has these, multiple versions that work. And maybe it's not the one that I would do it this way, that you come to the conclusion to first, but you need to be able to recognize that other solutions are possible. And that happens when you're only dragging in one direction. And here's a little cheat sheet. If you're only going up and down, only the rows can change, the numbers, right? See these numbers going up and down on the left-hand side? Therefore, if you're only going up and down, you can completely ignore the columns. They're not going to move anyway. So they could be locked, they could be unlocked. It doesn't matter. Likewise, if you're dragging only left, right, look along the top of my screen, it's these letters that can change. The numbers will never change. If I'm doing this motion, this is always going to be in row 6. So it doesn't matter if I lock the 6 or not, because I'm not dragging in that direction. So just be aware of that. So that's all I needed to tell you about to get started in this module. But I want to get started with you on the workbook first, just so you know where to start. So let's talk about what we're going to do with the rest of class today. So first of all, what to work on today and tomorrow. Make sure you're done with those homeworks that I mentioned last week, the syllabus, the extra credit discussion, and making sure you have Proctorio set up. Syllabus is due tonight. The other two you have till tomorrow. Now, the next thing I want to do is make sure we have the spreadsheet downloaded. That should have been emailed to you last week. If you weren't on my roster yet, maybe you didn't get it, just email me. I'll send you a copy. And we're also going to download the workbook. So where do you find the workbook? Well, we go into Canvas, into this modules section on the left-hand side. Go to the module 1 area, and this first link at the top, this is the first one you can actually click on, takes you to this page. That's the workbook, module1.pdf. Those are the questions we're going to be working on in a second. So I'm going to open up that in a second, but first I want to open up the spreadsheet that was hopefully emailed to you. Okay, there it is. So it looks like this when you first open it. Unfortunately, the person who saved this file hit save when they finished the last tab. So notice there, I don't know if you can see this. Is that the wrong direction? That's annoying. Part of my Zoom is covering it, but along the bottom, there are different tabs. Make sure you go all the way left along those tabs at the bottom, so you're on this page. This is the page that we're going to be using to answer the questions in part 1. The second tab will be useful in part 2, and the third and fourth tab are sort of extra exercises that are optional that you can look at if you want. So anyway, what's going on in this first tab? Well, in module 1, we are thinking of selling one of these 5 services. And we're trying to figure out which one and how much we should sell it for to optimize our profit. So we have some research that says, hey, if we sell it at one of these 4 prices, I expect to sell this many units. So like if we're selling shave kits at 50 bucks, I'm going to sell 1,200 of it. But if I lower the price to 35 bucks, I'm going to sell 2,000 units or whatever. So now we can use this information up here to fill out the revenue table. I'm going to do the top left one with you. The revenue for shave kits at 50 bucks is the price, $50, times the units sold, 1,200 units. That's a revenue of $60,000. Okay, now if you add a dollar sign in the appropriate place, you should be able to drag and fill out the rest of this table, but I'm going to let you work on that on your own. So this revenue stuff in here is what all the questions in the workbook for part 1 are going to be asked about. Now let's take a look at the workbook. Once you open it up, the first page has some general info. I think I mentioned most of this already. Second page has the first couple of questions we're going to work on. As you scroll further, there's part 2. Don't worry about that too much for today. Part 3, also don't worry about that today. Just work on part 1 today. But I did want to show you there is an answer key after part 3. So as you work through these, make sure you're doing them right. Just check your work. And if you go even further, there's additional exercises that are purely optional. But if you want some more things to use to practice for the exam, that's a good place to start. So anyway, let's look at this first question. It says, which of the following formulas can we will correctly calculate the revenue for shave kits at $50? So this is going to be annoying split screen, so I'm just going to copy paste this. Awesome. So pretend this is just my PDF. They're asking about this one right here, right? The one we just filled out. That's shave kits at $50. Which of these 4 formulas would correctly calculate $60,000? Notice they're all B5 times B6, which is what we had. They just have dollar signs in different areas. Now, this question is annoying because the very first question of our semester, and it's a trick question, which is ridiculous. But basically what's happening here is they're only asking about shave kits at $50. No dragging at all. They're literally asking about this one cell. So if we're not dragging, dollar signs don't do anything. So all of these are actually the same answer. They all give you 60,000. They only start behaving differently once you start dragging. So if you look in the back of the book, that one says all of the above work. So I'm gonna skip that one for now. I just wanted to mention why that one was a trick question. Let's go to the next question, and then I'll let you work on this on your own. The next question says, of these 4 formulas, which of them can I put here in cell B19, and I can drag them down to get the correct answer here? So you're going to just go through one at a time. Well, if I take B5 times B6, that's what I actually had, right? I don't have any dollar signs. I drag it down, I get B6 times B7. These 2 guys. Is that the correct revenue for this guy? That's what you're going to say to yourself. And then you're going to try this one and this one and this one. Yes, you can type them in one at a time, but it's better if you can think about them in your head and try to do this just by looking at it. And then use Excel as a crutch if necessary.